Good morning, Eastham, and welcome to Thursday morning, November 12th. November 12th. All right, we are in a B day today, which means it is a reader's day. So, wherever the day may find you, I hope you're doing well. If you pan over here to the Friday, right, you'll see that Friday is asynchronous. So, check back on Schoology. I'll always put a little assignment in there. So you're going to want to make sure that you're finishing the assignments from the week, mainly that clips video that we've been working on for 2 days. But then you also want to make sure that you're checking your asynchronous schedule time because I am going to put a small little quiz in. So just be ready for that. A couple other things I wanted to show you on Mac and VIA, where you can log in using Clever. When you log into Mac and VIA, there are a whole bunch of different book titles that are now available. Now you'll notice that there's only 20 of these copies. So you'll have to share these 20 copies of each book with different students around the St. Paul Public Schools. So I can't guarantee that all of these titles will be there, but you should be able to find some. Tuesday, you looked at 4 motifs, which are repeated ideas or concepts that reoccur throughout the story. We looked at that Taylor Swift video that Mr. Jameson recommended, and we saw that one thing, one idea, or one concept that seems to be present at the beginning, middle, and end, because that's what we talk about. Val, sorry, my dog is going crazy. Val, come here. Get out of there. Oh. Come on, out. Having a puppy at 6:45 in the morning, 6:50 in the morning is annoying. He's already been for his walk. We talked about motifs. So motifs are ideas or images, problems that reoccur throughout the story. And in that Taylor Swift video, we found one that was betrayal. The boy betrays her by closing the curtain at the beginning. The boy plays with the girl's hair and then gets into the car with the other girl. And then one that I added that we didn't talk about is that like the girls betray each other's trust sort of at the end too. The boy goes to the dance with the brown-haired girl, but he leaves with the blonde-haired girl. So there's kind of a betrayal of the girl code. Girl code, I don't really know what that is, but I'm just going to say that. All right, today you're going to begin thinking about theme. This is a huge part of what we're going to do for the rest of the year. That's the message of the story, or what the author wants you to learn about life. So the way I remember theme, Theme, is I remember it by thinking of what is the message of the story? What does the author want you to learn? And look at the first 5 letters of the message of the story. It spells theme. So that's the way I remember theme. I remember it by thinking of the message of the story. What is the author trying to teach you about life? So, for instance, Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't look as physically fit as he normally does. It's important to remember that with great power comes great responsibility. And I always like to start my theme by saying it's important too. And I'm just going to underline that right here so I remember to say that for all the classes. So you can always start it by saying it's important too. All right. And then I know this because Spider-Man has unique power, but he uses them for good, right? He has power, right? And with that power comes great responsibility. And then I know this. So what is my evidence, right? How do I know that it's important to use restraint with power? I know this because Spider-Man has unique power but uses them for good, right? So here's the theme. It's important to remember that with great with great power comes great responsibility. And then how do you know this? What proves it? Here's another one. You may know Up. Up here is about a guy, his wife dies, and he sort of goes into a depression, right? So what could I say is the message of the story? What does the author want me to learn about life? Well, I think the author wants me to learn that it's important to continue to be positive even when bad things might happen, okay? It's important to be positive even when bad things might happen. And the thing with theme is it's something that you'll understand even if you've never seen this story. So you wouldn't say it's important to be friends with whatever this kid's name is. I forget his name. It's important to love a dog. It's important to have fun with a dog because that's really specific, right? So we're going to try to think of a theme as something that even if I've never seen Up, I can still understand. So even if I've never seen Spider-Man, right? I can still understand that with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe, I could apply it to the presidency. Maybe I could apply it to being a coach. Maybe I could apply it to being a teacher. It's not just about Spider-Man. So I'm going to say it's important to stay positive. It's important to stay positive. And then how do I know this? So what in the story shows me that the old man is being positive, right? Even when things go bad. Well, I know this because he gives the young boy a chance to show him happiness and they end up on an adventure, right? That sort of proves that it's important to stay positive. He wanted to stay in his house all the time, didn't want to do anything, but the young boy comes out, right, and takes him on an adventure and forces the old man to be positive, right? Okay, we're going to practice this with one of my favorite stories, and the story is called Seventh Grade. And we're going to think about it's important too. So what does this author, Gary Soto, what does he teach us about life in this story? And then how do you know it? So you're going to be starting it off with it's important too, and I know because. So I'm going to read you this story, and then we're going to look at a couple particular parts of the story, and we're going to see if we can find some evidence here. All right, Seventh Grade by Gary Soto, one of my favorite stories. Let me just get a sip of my coffee here. On the first day of school, Victor stood in line half an hour before he came to a wobbly card table. He was handed a packet of papers and a computer card on which he listed his one elective, French. He already spoke Spanish and English, but he thought someday he might travel to France where it's cool, not like Fresno, where the summer days reached 110 degrees in the shade. There were rivers in France, and huge churches, and fair-skinned people everywhere, the way there were brown people all around Victor. Besides, Teresa, a girl he had liked since they were in catechism class at St. Teresa's, was taking French too. With any luck, they would be in the same class. Teresa is going to be my girl this year, he promised himself as he left the gym full of students in their new fall clothes. She was cute, and good in math, too. Victor thought he had walked down the hall to his homeroom. He ran into his friend, Michael Torres, by the water fountain that never turned off. They shook hands, Rasa style, and jerked their heads to one another in a saluda de vato. "How come you're making that face?" asked Victor. "I ain't making a face, S.A. This is my face." Michael said his face had changed during the summer. He had read a GQ magazine that his older brother had borrowed from the bookmobile and noticed that all the male models had the same look on their faces. They would stand, one arm around a beautiful woman, and scowl. They would sit at the pool, their rippled stomachs dark with shadows, and scowl. They would sit at dinner tables, cool drinks in their hands, and scowl as a sort of a scowl. "I think it works," Michael said. He scowled and let his upper lip quiver. His teeth showed along with the ferocity of his soul. "Belinda Reyes walked by a while ago and she looked at me," he said. Victor didn't say anything, though he thought his friend looked pretty strange. They talked about recent movies, baseball, their parents, and the horrors of picking grapes in order to buy their fall clothes. Picking grapes was like living in Siberia, except hot and more boring. "What classes are you taking?" Michael said, scowling. "French. How about you?" "Spanish. I ain't so good at it, even if I am Mexican." "I'm not either, but I'm better at it than math, that's for sure." A tiny 3-beat bell propelled students to their homerooms. The two friends socked each other in the arms and went their ways. Victor thinking, "Man, that's weird. Michael thinks making a face makes him handsome." On the way to his homeroom, Victor tried to scowl. He felt foolish until out of the corner of his eye he saw a girl looking at him. He thought, maybe it does work. He scowled with greater conviction. In the homeroom, roll was taken, emergency cards were passed out, and they were given a bulletin to take to their parents. The principal, Mr. Belton, spoke over the crackling loudspeaker, welcoming the students to the new year, new experiences, and new friendships. The students squirmed in their chairs and ignored him. They were anxious to go to first period. Victor sat calmly thinking of Teresa, who sat 2 rows away, reading a paperback novel. This would be his lucky year. She was in his homeroom and would probably be in his English and math classes. And of course, French. The bell rang for first period, and the students herded noisily through the doors. Only Teresa lingered, talking to the homeroom teacher. "So, you think I should talk to Mrs. Gaines?" she asked the teacher. "She would know about ballet." "She would be a good bet," the teacher said, then added, "or the gym teacher, Miss Garza." Victor lingered, keeping his head down and staring at his desk. He wanted to leave when she did so he could bump into her and say something clever. He watched her on the sly. As she turned to leave, he stood up and hurried to the door, where he managed to catch her eye. She smiled and said, "Hi, Victor." He smiled back and said, "Yeah, that's me." His brown face blushed. Why hadn't he said, "Hi, Teresa," or "How was your summer?" or something nice? As Teresa walked down the hall, Victor walked the other way, looking back, admiring how gracefully she walked, one foot in front of the other. So much for being in the same class, he thought. As he trudged to English, he practiced scowling. In English, they reviewed the parts of speech. Mr. Lucas, a portly man, waddled down the aisle, asking, "What is a noun?" A person, place, or thing," said the class in unison. "Yes. Now somebody give me an example of a person. You, Victor Rodriguez." "Teresa," Victor said automatically. Some of the girls giggled. They knew he had a crush on Teresa. He felt himself blushing again. "Correct, Mr. Lucas said. "Now provide me with a place." Mr. Lucas called on a freckled-faced kid who answered, "Teresa's house, with a kitchen full of big brothers." After English, Victor had math, his weakest subject. He sat in the back by the window, hoping that he would not be called on. Victor understood most of the problems, but some of the stuff looked like the teacher made it up as she went along. It was confusing, like the inside of a watch. After math, he had a 15-minute break, then social studies, and finally lunch. He bought a tuna casserole with buttered rolls, some fruit cocktail, and milk. He sat with Michael, who practiced scowling between bites. Girls walked by and looked at him. "See what I mean, Vic?" Michael scowled. "They love it." "Yeah, I guess so." They ate slowly, Victor scanning the horizon for a glimpse of Teresa. He didn't see her. She must have brought lunch, he thought, and is eating outside. Victor scraped his plate and left Michael, who was busy scowling at a girl 2 tables away. The small, triangle-shaped campus bustled with students talking about their new classes. Everyone was in a sunny mood. Victor hurried to a bag lunch area where he sat down and opened his math book. He moved his lips as if he were reading, but his mind was somewhere else. He raised his eyes slowly and looked around. No, Teresa. He lowered his eyes, pretending to study, then looked slowly to the left. No, Teresa. He turned a page in his book and stared at some math problems that scared him because he knew he would have to do them eventually. He looked to the right. Still no sign of her. He stretched out lazily in an attempt to disguise his snooping. Then he saw her. She was sitting with a girlfriend under a plum tree. Victor moved to a table near her and daydreamed about taking her to a movie. When the bell sounded, Teresa looked up and their eyes met. She smiled sweetly and gathered her books. Her next class was French, same as Victor's. They were among the last students to arrive in class, so all the good desks in the back had already been taken. Victor was forced to sit near the front, a few desks away from Teresa, while Mr. Bueller wrote French words on the chalkboard. The bell rang, and Mr. Bueller wiped his hands, turned to the class, and said, "Bonjour." "Bonjour," raved a few students. "Bonjour," Victor whispered. He wondered if Teresa heard him. Mr. Bueller said if that students study hard, at the end of the year they could go to France and then be understood by the populace. One kid raised his hand and asked, what's populous? The people of France. Mr. Bueller asked if anyone knew French. Victor raised his hand, wanting to impress Teresa. The teacher beamed and said, Oh, très bien. Parlez-vous français? Victor did not know what to say. The teacher wet his lips and asked something else in French. The room grew silent. Victor felt all eyes staring at him. He tried to bluff his way out by making noises that sounded French. Le me vave me con le crema? He said uncertainly. Mr. Bueller, wrinkling his face in curiosity, asked him to speak up. Great rose bushes of red bloomed on Victor's cheeks. A river of nervous sweat ran down his palms. He felt awful. Teresa sat a few desks away, no doubt thinking he was a fool. Without looking at Mr. Bueller, Victor mumbled, Frenchy, oui, she in September? Mr. Bueller asked Victor to repeat what he said. Frenchy, oui, she in September? Victor repeated. Mr. Bueller understood that the boy did not know French and turned away. He walked to the blackboard and pointed to the words on the board with a steel-edged ruler. Le bête, he sang. La bête, the students repeated. Le bateau est sur l'eau, he sang. Le bateau est sur l'eau. Victor was too weak from failure to join the class. He stared at the board and wished he had taken Spanish, not French. Better yet, he wished he could start his life over. He had never been so embarrassed. He bit his thumb until he tore off a sliver of skin. The bell sounded for fifth period, and Victor shot out of the room, avoiding the stares of other kids. But he had to return for his math book. He looked around sheepishly as the teacher, who was erasing the chalkboard, then widened his eyes in terror at Teresa, who stood in front of him. I didn't know you knew French, she said. That was good. Mr. Bueller looked at Victor, and Victor looked back. Oh, please, don't say anything, Victor pleaded with his eyes. I'll wash your car, mow your lawn, walk your dog, anything. I'll be your best student, and I'll clean your erasers after school. Mr. Bueller shuffled through some papers at his desk. He smiled and hummed as he sat down to work. He remembered his college years when he dated a girlfriend and borrowed cars. She thought he was rich because each time he picked her up in a different car. It was fun until he spent all his money on her and had to write home to his parents because he was broke. Victor couldn't stand to look at Teresa. He was sweaty with shame. Yeah, well, I picked up a few things from movies and books and stuff like that. They left class together, and Teresa asked him if he would help her with French. Sure, any time, Victor said. I won't be bothering you, will I? Oh, no, I like being bothered. Bonjour, Teresa said, leaving him outside class. She smiled and pushed wisps of hair from her face. Yeah, right. Bonjour, Victor said. He turned his head to class. The rosebuds of shame on his face became bouquets of love. Teresa's a great girl, he thought, and Mr. Bueller, he's a good guy. He raced to Metal Shop. After Metal Shop was biology, and after biology, a long sprint to the public library, where he checked out 3 French textbooks. He was going to like 7th grade. One of my favorite stories. All right, so we're thinking about theme in this story. Here's Victor. He's hitting that dab, right? And we're going to be thinking about it's important too. So I'm going to pick a particular part in this story because you can find multiple themes, but I'm going to look in one particular place. And it's when Victor is pretending to know French, okay? And I'm just going to read this part again. And I'm going to see what is the author trying to teach me about life right here. So I'm here and it says, great rose bushes of red bloomed on Victor's cheeks. A river of nervous sweat ran down his palms. He felt awful. Teresa sat a few desks away, no doubt thinking he was a fool. Without looking at Mr. Bueller, Victor mumbled, Frenchy, oui, j'ai in September? Mr. Bueller asked Victor to repeat what he said. Frenchy, oui, j'ai in September? Victor repeated. Mr. Bueller shuffled his papers on his desk. He smiled, hummed as he sat down to work. He remembered his college years when he dated a girl and borrowed cars. She thought he was rich each time he picked up her in a different car. It was fun until he spent all his money on her and had to write home to his parents because he was broke. Now I'm going to skip a little bit head away, and this is where another part in the story where where Mr. Bueller is talking to some other students. One kid raised his hand and asked, "What's populous?" "The people of France," Mr. Bueller asked. If anyone knew French, Victor raised his hand, wanting to impress Teresa, and the teacher beamed and said, "Oh, très bien, parlez-vous français?" Victor didn't know what to say. The teacher wet his lips and asked him something else in French. The room grew silent. Victor felt all eyes staring at him. He tried to bluff his way out by making noises that sounded French. So these are three different parts in the story. And I'm thinking that this author is trying to tell me something. And I'm thinking that this author is trying to tell me that it's important to what? What are they trying to tell me? Well, I notice that Victor sort of feels like a fool here when he's trying to speak French. I notice that Mr. Bueller here remembers when he tried to date a girl and kind of pretended he was somebody else until he had to write his parents and ask for more money. I see here where Victor is trying to, again, pretend that he knows French, but he's running into some problems. So maybe I could say it's important to be yourself. Be yourself. Be yourself. Oop, can you read that? I think you can. Be yourself. And then I would want to know, what is my evidence? Well, let's see if I can find some times where either being yourself was important or maybe not being yourself had kind of disastrous consequences. Well, let's see. Here is a part where a river of nervous sweat ran down his palms. He felt awful, right? Victor mumbled Frenchy, oui, oui, in September. This is kind of evidence, right, that shows that Victor is not really being himself, and it's having some disastrous consequences. Here, Mr. Bueller even remembers, right? He remembered his college years when he dated a girl and borrowed cars. She thought he was rich because he picked her up in a different car. It was fun until he had spent all his money and had to write home to his parents because he was broke. That's evidence that it's important to be yourself, right? The final one here is let's look here where he's trying to pretend he knows French, right? Victor didn't know what to say, right? He tried to bluff his way out, right, by making noises in French. There again, bluff is to kind of lie. There's some evidence that proves that it's important to be yourself. Now look at this, important to be yourself. That's an idea that anyone can understand. You didn't have to read this story to know that a lesson in life might be it's important to be yourself. Now, if you said it's important to not lie to Mr. Bueller, that's so specific. You would only know that if you read the story. So you have to kind of think about a theme as being something that any person could understand, even if they never read this story. Okay? So what you're going to do today is you're going to take a look here and you're going to be completing this for your story. One theme in my story is that it's important to, and you know this because. So just like I have right here. That's in your Schoology. So let me click over to your Schoology, right? Here's your work. What's one lesson you've learned in life? And then you can start by saying it's important to. What you're watching right now is Finding Theme in Literature. Your assignment, which you'll see right here. Okay, finding theme in your book. This assignment is this right here. So that's this. And then you're going to turn it in, obviously, right here. And then the last thing I want to know is just, did you find a theme in your story? Right? And you're going to just tell me yes or no. All right, everybody. That's today's lesson. I will see you maybe in office hours later today or in office hours on Friday. Have a great day.